I'm here today with the three founders of Apstra, Sasha Ratkovic, Mansour Karam, and world-renowned researcher David Cheriton. The company's goal is to make infrastructure simple by enabling what they describe as a self-operating network. It's a compelling vision, and Apstra was just named to the Gartner Cool Vendors and Enterprise Networking list for 2017. Tell me about the pain that enterprises are facing. Where are their data centers falling down and incurring tremendous costs?
So data centers are operated in a massively inefficient way today. In order to deliver on a new business initiative, it takes months to provision the network. That's months of lost revenue. If you have a problem, like an outage, it takes hours, if not days, to troubleshoot. Engineers are doing that by logging into every device and correlating all that information in their heads. Think about all of the changes that need to happen in order to keep up with the business. Some organizations make thousands of changes a month. Each one of these changes is effectively done manually. It requires hundreds of people, and the process is, in many cases, flawed.
Apstra is offering a self-operating system. What is that? How is it different than what we've seen in the past?
The way a self-operating network compares to a traditional network is very much like a self-driving car compares to a traditional car. The two look very much the same. However, the self-driving car has highly intelligent software that controls all the components and ensures that the car delivers on the driver's intent to get to their destination. And a self-driving car, in order to deliver on this intent, needs to measure hundreds of parameters of telemetry every second and make the adjustments that are required in real time in order to ensure that the car is behaving as intended. So that is the software that differentiates, that type of software is what differentiates a traditional network and a self-operating network, and that is the software that we, as in Apstra, are delivering to the market.
You describe AOS as an intent-based system. What does intent mean in this context, and how do customers express their intent?
So intent is vendor-agnostic declarative specification of desired outcome, and it essentially defines what and not how. And intent contains a dynamic community of objects that represent business rules, users, applications, systems, services, constraints, capabilities. So as such, you have to have a way to express not only many different types of objects, but also to express very complex relationships that exist between them. So to express that, we are using actually a variant of graph model. And that is very applicable to this use case because first, you can create many different types of objects, but more importantly, you can express relationships with these objects in a very succinct manner.
Gartner has cited other companies in their intent-based networking systems report, including Cisco and Juniper. How is what you're doing different than those giant companies?
Right, so to do any sort of comparison, you want to come up with some set of criteria as to what do you compare it against. And again, based on previous discussion, one would, I would compare that by saying, do this system provide a single source of truth? How complete is this single source of truth? Does it cover all these aspects that we have described? How extensible is modeling of this intent? Can you programmatically reason about it? And in the presence of change, the question is how do you react to it? So dealing with these real-time changes is another aspect of our system. So we have answered all of these questions, and I don't know in details comparisons to what these vendors are doing, but if one were to do the analysis, I would go over these criteria, and we have answers to all these questions. The second aspect is that the two companies that you mentioned, they are vendors. And while vendors may have different reasons to be vendor agnostic, depending on the size and the market share, there is always going to be a question in customers' mind is, can a vendor provide a vendor agnostic solution?
One key feature you call out is your distributed-based approach to creating AOS. Why is that so important?
Well, the biggest problem to be addressed in this domain space is how do you deal with this enormous distributed state. So there is a lot of state and you need to reason about it and you need to be able to change it. So the only way to do it is to actually distributed and have a horizontally scalable architecture that can store large amount of data and yet be able to react to it in real time. And then very important aspect of it is actually dealing this in a closed loop where you are actually validating the changes that you're making, that they are not actually breaking your system.
In a large network, any large network, changes are happening all the time, sometimes minute by minute. How do you handle that vast quantity of change with these very large-scaled networks?
Right, so the way to deal with that scale is, as I mentioned, we have this concept of this distributed data store that holds this large and distributed state, and when there is a change in this state, we need to react and do some processing on it. Well, the processing is done by agents, and these agents simply subscribe to data from a data store, do some processing, and then publish into the data store. So they are stateless, and they're essentially state machines. If they die, you can simply restart it, it picks up from where they left off. But the fact that they are state machines also means that we support parallel execution. So you can simply start multiple agents in parallel and they are just sharing the workload. So the way to deal with this burst of events is simply horizontally scaling and adding more state machines, more agents that can be running on servers that you add to your infrastructure.
David, you've identified big challenges when you helped fund Google and VMware and Arista. What are the big challenges you've identified when founding Apstra?
I think we're in this trend where we're automating all sorts of systems, beyond just the basic functionality, but how they manage themselves. And this is a big trend. And I've been involved with networking for many years. And the problem with networking is that the industry builds boxes and the users run networks, a system of boxes, and so you need a management layer, and till this point it wasn't really feasible to build something that would manage it automatically, and we identified this point in technology where it suddenly became feasible to do this and solve a big problem.
So why now? Why was this the time to bring a company like Apstra into the world?
Well, I think there's a bunch of changes in the industry that took place that made this feasible. For one, we now have these basic devices, the switches, with what are called APIs, which means that you can control them programmatically, and that didn't exist a few years back. In fact, I think we can credit Arista Networks for sort of pushing the industry in the direction of providing that extensibility in terms of APIs. And I think another reason is that people have transitioned to having multiple vendors in their network, and so there's a need for something that stretches across multiple different vendors' boxes to make it work together. And then I think the third reason is that network has just become absolutely critical, and yet it needs to be evolving very rapidly to meet new application demands. So you can't manage the network in human terms anymore. You have to automate that to operate more efficiently while not bringing the network down, since it's so critical.
What's unusual about Apstra is that you're self-funded. Why is this good for your customers?
Well, I think one advantage is that when we're self-funded, we basically can operate a little bit more on our own time schedule and take the time to develop a solid technical foundation of the product. And when you develop a solid technical foundation of the product, not only is the initial product better, but I think that foundation serves us to have what we like to call feature velocity, where we can address customer needs more quickly and evolve the product towards what everybody needs because we have a solid foundation.
Could you sum up in one sentence maybe why a CIO should look at Apstra and AOS?
I'd say a CIO should look at AOS because it's on the leading edge of network automation, and network automation is something that has to happen. It's just the future.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time. It has been a real pleasure.
Thank you.